When we're establishing existing conditions, it really starts with knowing how Civil 3D handles points. We have to go back to basic geometry when we're working with points in Civil 3D. So what is a point? Geometry points are zero-dimensional, meaning they don't have volume, area, length, or any other dimension. Although if geometry points are zero-dimensional, how do you define or visually display a point? Many times we're used to X marks the spot, but as soon as we mark the spot, the point is no longer zero-dimensional. When we draw points with survey or existing conditions, they typically fall within two categories: points that identify a linear shape or points that identify objects. Points that identify a linear shape can include curb lines, corners of buildings, or a center line of a road. Having an X marks the spot point isn't as critical for a linear shape as it is for identifying objects. Points that identify objects include marking the location of trees, manholes, utility poles, and different structures. These points symbolize the object you're marking, so it really should resemble the structure the point is identifying. Displaying something visually in Civil 3D goes back to our styles, so we'll take a look at that in this video. Point styles control the visual look of the point marker, or the X. I'm in the 0301 point styles drawing, and you'll notice that I already have a line drawn, and we're going to create some points within this drawing. So first, go to the Home ribbon and to the Create Ground Data panel. Now under the points, there are many different means to create points in this drawing. Let's choose the most popular option, Point Creation Tools. We get a little panel right here. Click these two chevrons to maximize it. I'm going to open this up just a little bit more so we can see what we're doing here. Now this new panel right here gives us the same options as this little drop down gives us. On the far left, we're going to create points manually. Now whenever we click on this chevron, if we expand it out, it gives us a list of all of our command settings for point creation. Now do you remember when we were working with command settings within the Settings tab for the drawing itself? Now you're starting to see how these command settings all come into play, right? They control the default layer of points as well as the default styles. If I expand out point creation, you'll notice we have some controls when we're creating a point. Now for this drawing, it's set so that we won't be prompted for an elevation. See how right now it's set to automatic rather than manual? We've got that set to automatic, and we have a elevation set for that default, which is 100. So we won't be prompted for an elevation as we're creating our points. Again, that means that Civil 3D will always enter a default elevation of 100 with every point that I create. I can change this option at any time and have it prompt for elevations by choosing manual. We can also do this with point descriptions. Right now it's set to automatic. We can also set that to manual, but I'm going to leave that on automatic. And you'll notice that we have a default description of FH for fire hydrant. Once all of these command settings have been taken care of, we can go ahead and create our new point. We'll have a point with a number assigned to it with an FH description with an elevation of 100. Let's click this option to bring it back to automatic. Let's collapse this chevron. Let's go over to the far left. and manually create a point. You'll see in our command line that it's asking us to please specify a location for the new point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on my object snap by typing in F3. And I'm going to change some of the settings here. Right now we've got it set to endpoint. I'm going to leave it just like that. Click that first point. And you'll see how it automatically gives us a point number 1, elevation of 100, and a description of FH for fire hydrant. Let's go ahead and do that for the next point. I'm going to type in END for endpoint instead. Can do that as well. There's lots of ways of doing things in Civil 3D, and you'll see now we have a point number 2 with the same elevation and the same description. And you'll notice that I wasn't prompted for any point information. The description and elevation were automatically added. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this command by pressing the escape key. If I select one of my points, you'll notice that the contextual ribbon shows up. Let's go ahead and click on Properties within the ribbon, and I'm going to go ahead and dock this off to the right hand side. So since I've already selected a point, the Properties palette shows me that point, point number 1, description FH, to COGO point, and I have some other options here. I've got Style and Point Label Style. Now because it's a Civil 3D object, it shows up as a COGO point and has two options. Anytime you're working with coordinate labels, you will have two styles, the marker and the label. So you can see right here in the Properties panel, we've got the style of the marker itself and the point label style, which is the label. This applies for a point, but it can also apply to station offset labels for alignments, for example, or elevation labels for surfaces. Let's zoom in on point number 1. Come back to the Properties palette and change the style by navigating to IMV Util Water Hydrant. See how that changed? After selecting this style, you'll notice how the marker has changed. I wanted the marker to symbolize the object that it's marking. I haven't changed the label, so it shows up as a default label. We can see that right here. Let's change the point label style to just description. Now it's showing us just the description of that point. Now look at the grip in the middle. It's a rotated square. There's a rotation of 45 degrees which actually controls the coordinate. If I select it and I move it, it'll change the coordinate and the Z elevation. Although if I hover over it, I get a contextual menu. With the point grip, you have many different options. If we hover over our marker, you can see all these different options. Let's go ahead and rotate our marker about like so. Now my fire hydrant is rotated, but my label isn't. If I pick the label grip, I can move the label and the contextual menu opens up independent of the marker itself. So let's go ahead and pick the grip and move it to wherever we want. Now you'll see there's some additional grips that are now on our label. These grips are for a leader. When we move a label, it goes into what's known as a drag state. When the drag state opens, a leader with an arrow could show up depending on the style. But since this style doesn't display a leader, it won't show one. Although the grips for it still show up. If I don't like these changes, I can float over these grips and choose to reset the label. Or I could reset everything, my marker included. If I choose to reset all, the marker will rotate back to its original rotation and the label returns to its default state. Working with points is all about visual control. Know that you're dealing with two different styles, one for the point marker and one for the point label. We now know how to manually manipulate point and label styles. But what do we do when we're working with thousands of points? Manually changing styles would be very time-consuming. There is a process we can use to automate setting the point and label style. Autodesk Civil 3D provides us with many ways to automate this process. The easiest way to automate point styles is to use point groups to control it. We now have our 0302 point groups exercise file opened up, and you'll see 2 points. We'll go ahead and select them. And in the Properties panel, you'll see that both styles for both the point and the label are set to default, meaning we haven't manually overridden the point styles. So where can I control my defaults? Click on the Home ribbon palette. Now choose Tool Space. Under the Prospector tab, you'll notice there's a section called Point Groups. If I expand this, you'll notice we already have a point group called All Points. This means there is a collection of all points in the drawing. When I right-click on this group and choose Properties, it will provide me with the info about this point group. You'll see on the Information tab of the point group properties there are default styles. When we have our point styles defined within a point group, it will dictate the defaults. Let's try this out. Go ahead and create a new point group. We do this by clicking on the point groups, right-clicking, and then select New. Now a point group is a way of tagging a point or categorizing them. In social media terms, it's a way of hashtagging our points. Points can belong to multiple point groups. Go ahead and name our point group Fire Hydrants. Let's change the point style and make the default marker. We'll make that look like a fire hydrant. We do that by choosing this right here, IMV Util Water Hydrant. Now change the point style default to just description. Now what points will be included in this group? Go into the Include tab and include them. You can do this by point numbers, by checking this option right here with point numbers matching and then listing the points, or you can do it manually by selecting the points within the drawing. The most common way of including points in a point group is to do it automatically by raw description. To do this, we're going to say that any point with a raw description of FH or the fire hydrant will be included in this group. Now we're going to put an asterisk right after that, which means that it's a wildcard. If I have a raw description of FH-say 301 to number the fire hydrant structure, it'll show up in the point group because it has an asterisk right after it, and that makes it a wildcard. You can also add a comma to add additional raw descriptions that can be included in the point group. When the drawing finds a point with these specified raw descriptions, it will automatically add them to the point group. Let's just leave the fire hydrants with a wildcard and we'll click OK. Now we have a new point group called fire hydrants, and you'll see our points are now stylized according to the group we created. Notice there's a little square with a dot when I look at the All Points group. This means there's a collection of points within this point group. If I select the group, you'll see a list of points down below. When I look at the All Points and Fire Hydrant point groups, you'll see our 2 points are listed in each group. So which point group stylizes the point? The point group at the top has the priority and sets the style for our points. You can check in our Properties palette to see a section called Primary Point Group. You can control the order of the primary point group. Look under the prospector and right-click on the point groups. Choose Properties, and a list shows all of our point groups. If we move all points to the top of the list, then our hydrants will be stylized by the All Points group style defaults. Go ahead and click Apply, click OK. When I click OK, you'll see how the point style switches to the default styles found within all points. Back in our point properties, if we go ahead and select our points again, we can override these defaults manually at any time. Let's go ahead and add another description key to address our power pole situation. Let's go to our description key editor, and the way that we do that again is we go to our Settings tab. We go under Point, Description Key Sets, and right click and click Edit Keys. We get our point description key editor right here. I'm going to set it right here. And first, let's go ahead and add a brand new description key. Right click on our oak, click New, and let's type in our code of PP, which is what we have listed right here. Let's change the style of the point itself. We want it to look like a power pole. So go ahead and check the style, select the default, and let's look for our power pole right here. Click OK. Our point label style, let's keep all that consistent. Let's go ahead and have that, keep that checked, and we'll select just description. Click OK. Next, I'm going to change the format, but notice that we aren't changing the raw description of PP. If we exported this point to an ASCII file, it would still say PP. We're simply changing the format of how it's being read visually within the drawing. So instead of going with the raw description of PP, I'm going to type in UP. Type in Enter. Next, let's go ahead and change the layer. Click on that box right here, and let's find our layer. VUtil Power Structure. Click OK. OK, now we have a brand new description key that we've added to our set. Let's go ahead and close this down. And if you remember, the way that we apply description keys is we go ahead and click on our point groups, right click on all points, and click Apply Description Keys. See how the new styles have been applied, and even the label style has been applied. So there's even more power with the description key editor. Let's take a look at our small little oak tree. Remember that problem that we had earlier? Let's see if we can scale this point. We're going to apply a rule that the diameter of the tree at the breast height is about a foot of the size of the critical root zone, which is the diameter of the tree. Notice that our field crew entered a 24-inch diameter. We'll use that along with our ability to scale. Let's take a look at this checked box under parameter 1. This is a zero-base collection. The way this works is it will read the first piece of text as a number after the code. Our code is oak, which is 0. If we look at our power pole, the PP code is 0. If we look at the fire hydrant, the FH is 0. Anything after it will be parameter 1 because there is a space between these two. When we add another space to the code, it will put that on parameter 2. So know that the number entered after oak will be parameter 1, or the second piece of text after the space. We'll use this to apply the scale to X, Y, and Z. Go ahead and check those boxes. So we'll take the raw description of oak 24 and reformat that. Now 24-inch oak makes a little more sense than oak 24. We're going to take parameter 1 and put a little quotation mark for inches, space, then parameter 0. Let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and click in our format box, and we'll put in $sign for string, 1 for our parameter, and then put our quotes for inches. Go ahead and put a space, $sign for string, and then type in 0 because we want our raw code to show up there. Then go ahead and hit enter. Now again, the parameter is defined by the $sign in each of these cases. The $sign equals string. Now if there's a $sign with an asterisk, it will simply read the entire string that's in the raw description exactly as it is. Or we can override it completely and say ignore the raw description and we're going to put in our own. So there are 3 different avenues here for how we're changing what they call the full description. Remember, our styling is using this. So again, the way that we have it set up is that it's going to read the string of parameter 1 and then add quotation marks, space, and then read parameter 0. Let's go ahead and close this box. Again, remember how we apply our description keys. Right click on all points, apply description keys. Now you can see how our oak tree has changed. It's been sized up according to the diameter entered for the tree. Then the drawing took the values from the raw description and reformatted them to read properly. All of this was done by applying description keys. Now imagine the list of descriptions a survey crew might have. This list can be rather lengthy. If a standard list of descriptions and codes are set to a specific standard for a company, it could automate how these points look. This can save time by putting everything on the right layer, style, and label using description keys. You'll find that most of the data in Civil 3D is typically kept within the drawing. However, you'll find that we can link data between drawings later. Survey data can be a separate entity. Civil 3D handles it by keeping it outside the drawing in what they call a survey database. The survey database will collect all of the points collected in the field and convert them to points, line work, and figures in your drawing. You can find the survey database under the Survey tab within the Toolspace palette. Again, the survey database is the main area where our project data will be stored. This data won't be stored in the drawing, but outside in a separate directory in our project folder. Take a look at the equipment databases. It allows us to adjust the equipment settings as the points are brought in. When I right-click on the sample database and say Manage Equipment Database, you'll see settings that are available within the Equipment Database Manager. This information includes EDM and where your prism offset is. Let's close that down for right now. Most companies usually have already made adjustments to this and may use other means to translate this. Equipment databases aren't used as often in companies using Civil 3D in the survey. The figure prefix allows us to control how the line work looks when it's drawn. For example, what layer it goes on and what style is used. When you're working with a Civil 3D object, what style will be used and what kind of figure is it? There are a few different types of figures. Horizontal figures that control line work and figures having 3D control such as a break line. All of this will be stored in the figure prefix database. Let's open up a sample one. Right-click and choose Manage Figure Database. You'll see nothing here, but you'll see the columns. We'll be creating or editing the figure prefix database soon, but you'll have the name of the figure, which is the point description. Let's cancel this as well. The fourth database is called the Linework code sets. For example, when a figure is drawn, the drawing needs to know when to start and end a line. Or perhaps we have a curved line. The drawing needs to know the beginning and ending as well as a point on the curve. All of these are controlled within the Linework code set. Right-click on the sample and choose Properties. You'll see all of the different coding methods that can be set within the database. These databases are not drawing specific, and they're located at a different location in our settings. Let's close out of this. If you notice, as I float over one of these, it'll actually say where they're located, the path of that line code set, by default when we create or install Autodesk Civil 3D. What if we want to set that to another location? Here are some buttons up at the top that'll give us some of that control. You can choose the button on the far left called Survey User Settings. Within the Survey User Settings, you can define where all of these databases are stored, such as the Survey Database, the Equipment Database, Linework, and Figure Defaults. Once you've defined, installed, or deployed this, it can be done per user. Companies who are actually creating deployments for the software can set this in their deployment. And so it's recommended that you would have this set to some shared location on a network so that you don't have a different Linework code set from the surveyors working next to you. Let's take a look at how we can import survey data. You can always import points by clicking on the Insert tab, and you can insert points directly into the drawing using the option to insert points from a file. This creates points from an external ASCII file, and it imports them directly into the drawing as opposed to using the database. There's also an option to import points from an external file into the drawing using the Import Survey Data button on the Insert tab. We'll be focusing on this method of importing data in order to bring these points into a survey database. When I choose this option, it's going to walk me through a wizard to import the data into the survey database. Typically, anytime you see the word survey in front of the functions in Civil 3D, chances are you're working with data in the database. Remember, when we're editing a survey point, we're adjusting values in the survey database, not just the drawing we're in. Let's cancel out of this and create our new local survey database in a different way. Go ahead and click on the Survey tab in your Toolspace palette and right-click on Survey Databases. click Set Working Folder. Now this will be the directory that will contain our database. Most databases will have the working folder set to a project directory on a company network. If you put a survey database on your local hard drive, it won't be accessible to others who might be working on the project. So for demonstration purposes, we'll be setting our working folder to a directory on my local hard drive. Click Select Folder. Next, let's right-click again on the survey database and select Create New Local Survey Database. We're going to name this database Civil 3D Example. Click OK. Now there's some survey database settings and some defaults that again are coming into play from the survey user settings here. Let's open up the survey database settings and see what we can edit. Go ahead and right click on our database and choose Edit Survey Database Settings. First off, notice that the survey database has its own coordinate zone and system. Remember, we're not working with a drawing, we're working with the database. The database will store everything on its own coordinate system and other values. When we import data, it'll handle the translation for you. So we're going to go ahead and set this coordinate system. Go ahead and click this button. And then our project is in Georgia. So right under Categories, click this drop-down menu and go to USA, Georgia. Now the coordinate system is NAD 83 West Zone to the US foot. So we'll go ahead and select that here. NAD 83 Georgia State Plane West Zone US foot. Then I click OK. When I do that, you'll see that the distance is automatically set to US foot, and it's grayed out because it's part of this coordinate system. If you want, you can always leave the coordinate system blank, but make sure that the distance is set to US foot. And again, the translation would be fine. Now there's a few other values and settings that you can set here, and you can choose to create somewhat of a settings template to import or export those settings for future use. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now our survey database is created and ready to have data added to it. So let's go ahead and add some simple data. Let's go ahead and right click on our database. We'll open for edit. And then what we want to do is go ahead and click on Import Events, right click, and click Import Survey Data. Now it gives us a little wizard right here. And since we've already set up our database settings, we won't have to go through this particular side of the wizard. So let's go ahead and click Next. So now if we look here under the data source type, we have several different options. You can even import points that are already within the drawing into the survey database. But we don't necessarily need to do that right now. Let's go ahead and pick Point File. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick an external ASCII file and import that into our wizard. And we do that by clicking on the plus. And I've got this survey data just sitting on my desktop right now, so go ahead and click Open. It's a text file. Now what Civil 3D will attempt to do is to determine what the point file format is. And right now it has selected easting, northing, and elevation. That's what the ENZ stands for, but that's not exactly the format that this file is in. The file that we're working with is a point number, northing, easting, elevation, and description. So click this option all the way down at the bottom and you can see a preview of what that looks like. So go ahead and click Next. Next, the wizard will ask for the survey networks. We've already created that within our settings, so we'll go ahead and click Next. Lastly, we have our import settings. If we scroll down here, everything appears to be correct. One of the things that I want to do is I want to process the line work during the import. Go ahead and check that box, and it's on the current line work code set of sample, which is correct. And Civil 3D will also give our import event the text file name. So in other words, this import event will appear underneath our survey database under import events. Next, I want to look down here. We've got insert figure objects, which is checked on. I want to also import survey points. That's very important. And then click Finish. Now you can see the power of that import event. If we look within our tool space and we expand this a little bit more, you'll see that Civil 3D created an import event for that specific text file. We can look under survey points. We have all of our points now listed within our database. And another way to check to see if our points are within our database or within our drawing, you can go into Prospector, and if you click on points, you'll see that all of these points are actually locked. So when the points are locked within a drawing, that means that it's connected to a survey database.
Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be assigning user-defined properties to points. Now in this exercise, you'll use the point groups to associate user-defined properties with points in your drawing. This exercise continues from creating a label style that displays a user-defined property. And so let's go about assigning user-defined properties to points. If you're in CAD, go to your points-4C drawing, which is located in your tutorials folder. And then after that, go ahead and go over to your tool space and then click on, make sure you're on the Prospector tab, which is what we're in right now. And then we want to focus on, let me see here, we want to focus on point groups right here. Let's open this portion up a little bit more. Okay, now you see if I click on points, I get a listing of points down here at the bottom. And then under point groups, I get a totally different list. Okay? If I open up this classification, I get a list right here. And what we want to do is in the item view, we want to click Storm Manholes right here. And for classification, we want to change this to manhole UDP. So after we've done that, we're going to apply the user-defined property point label style. So in the Prospector tree view, expand the point groups. So we're going to expand this. Click Storm Manholes. If we open this up even further, then if we scroll all the way over like so, we have our point label style. If I don't want it all the way over here, I can click and drag this column so that it's maybe over here, so it isn't so far over. And for 307, if I wanted to change this, I could click that cell and I can change the label style to manhole UDP. Then click OK. Now if I wanted to, I could click on 307 again and zoom to, and here's that manhole right here. See how it lists the invert right here? Well, how about this? How about instead of all of this other stuff, see all this other stuff that we don't really need right here? We can click right here and we can go down here, grid listing, we can turn that off, we can turn this off, longitude, latitude, scale factor, all the stuff that we don't really need to view at this time. We can just leave it like that so we can kind of keep it a little easier to understand here. Let's move this a little further over. That's our point label style column. What did it look like before? If we click on this cell again and we go back to standard, see how that changes back? So if I want to bring that back again, click that, click on standard again, then click on manhole UDP, then click OK. This references our last exercise from our last video tutorial. So if you want to know how to add this user-defined information into this label style, just revert back to the previous video or previous exercise within this course. Okay, we're going to repeat the steps that we just went through. We're going to change the style to manhole UDP for point 667. Just like so. We'll zoom in. And you can see that's changed. Okay, now we're going to specify user-defined property values. For 307, we'll click on that. Then we're going to look for the manhole invert cell. It's not listed here. Let's see if we can get that to pop up. If we right-click on our column heading right here, and if we scroll down, here we go, manhole pipe in invert. Let's check that back on. And we scroll over here. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. This is it right here. This is our user-defined property right here. I'm going to move this over here, kind of shift it over. Move that, well, maybe over there. Okay. One more. Let's try one more. Okay, that's better. Okay. So for point 307, we've got that highlighted. We've got our pipe in invert column listed. So we want to actually add an invert elevation for this. We'll change this to 93.05. Then hit enter. And let's zoom to that point. Zoom to, zoom out a little bit. And there's our invert elevation right here. Let's go to 667. Let's zoom to that point. If we zoom out a little bit here, let's scrunch this up a little bit. Okay, here's our invert listing, 667. If we scroll over to our manhole, where's it at? Did it move? Let's just slowly scroll over. Oh, it looks like the column moved. That's a little weird, isn't it? Okay, here it is. Manhole pipe in invert. For 667, which is right here, click that. And we'll type in an elevation of 93. Then hit enter. And there you have it. Okay, in this tutorial we're going to be importing points with user-defined properties. In this exercise you'll create a custom point file format and then import point information that includes user-defined properties from an external file, such as like a text file or something like that. This exercise continues from assigning user-defined properties to points. So we're going to create a point file format for importing user-defined properties. What we're going to do first is we're going to open up our points-4D drawing, which is located in your tutorials folder. And then we're going to go into our tool space and then go under our settings tab. Now after that we have our point collection right here. This is our point. If we can expand this collection right here. And then we've got point file formats. Go ahead and expand that so you can see what's going on right here. You can see all the different formats right here. What these formats mean are northing, easting, and Z means the elevation. And it's all space delimited for this particular file format. With, say for this file format, the P means like point number, N means northing, E means easting, Z means elevation, and then D means description. So that file format is for text files that you get from a survey crew that they supply to you in order to import that information into your Civil 3D program. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own file format right here. And we're going to do that by right-clicking on Point File Formats, and we're going to create a new one. We get our Point File Formats dialog box. We're going to select User Point File, then click OK. Then we get our Point File Format dialog box. I'm going to enter in some information here. I'm going to type in manhole data. For the comment tag, I'm going to put a hashtag in here. Then for format options, I'm going to select delimited by. It's going to be delimited by a comma. In the table of column names, we're going to click the first column heading right here. Then we get our Point File Formats Select Column Name dialog box. And it says select the name of the column from the list of available names. If the column contains data that's not used, choose unused. Okay, so if we click this drop down, we're going to select point number. Then we're going to click OK. We're going to repeat this. We're going to go to column number 2, that's unused. For column name, we're going to select this. And we're going to select manhole material. Then we're going to click OK. So you can see how that's coming along. Then the next one, select that, click this drop down. Then we're going to go down, we're going to select manhole pipe in invert. Then we're going to click OK. Next is going to be the manhole diameter. I'm sorry, the manhole in diameter. Select that, click OK. Select the next one. This one is going to be pipe in material. And click OK. Let me expand this so you can see a little bit more of what's going on here. pipe in diameter, material. Okay, now it's time for pipe out. Pipe out invert right here. Click OK. Here's the next one. Manhole pipe out diameter is the next one. And then last, it's going to be manhole pipe out material. Right there. So you see, after as we're going through the list of all of these different, I guess, user-defined properties, they're all being taken out of this list. Manhole pipe out material was the last one. Did we have one that was manhole diameter? Did we list that? No, we didn't list that. Okay. We'll do this. Yeah, we're missing one. Manhole diameter. Let's put it right here. See that right there? Click OK. And I'm going to move this right here. Okay. See how I did that? You can move the columns by clicking on it and putting it over here. There we go. Okay. Then we click OK. We're going to import user-defined property data from a text file. In the tool space, we're going to go to our Prospector tab, and we're going to ensure that our point groups is expanded, and we're going to select the storm manholes group right here. If I hover over this, you'll see that it says that this item contains 9 sub-items. So 9 points of data. And some of the data columns are blank. So if I expand this and look around here, yeah, we can see some of the data right here. We've got our point number, we've got our easting, northing, elevation, raw description, full description, description format, and we got some extra information right here. And we've got all of this stuff. But some of that stuff is missing. See how the manhole material information is missing right here. Okay, so in the tool space, under the Prospector tab, we're going to go click on points. We're going to right click and select Create. Then we're going to select this button right here to import points. We've got our Import Points dialog box. If we scroll down under the point file format, we've got our manhole data that we just created. So if we select that, and then we press the plus, if I go up one level within my civil tutorials, I've got my manhole data text file. This is what we got from the field crew. Click open. Then we have all of our information. Let's make this a little bit larger here. See all this data? We've got the manhole material, which is concrete. We've got the manhole diameter, which is 48. We've got all of this extra information that we can import now. Now we're going to go ahead and click OK. Then we get the duplicate point number dialog box. Sometimes this happens. For the resolution, what we're going to do is we're going to merge. Then click OK. And we're going to apply this to all duplicate point numbers. So the point data has been imported. I'm going to close this. Now go into your Prospector tab again within your tool space. Then click on the manholes point group. And let's see the information. There it is. Remember how before we didn't have the manhole material? Now we've got concrete listed right here. We've got our manhole diameter. We've got a lot of that information that we were missing before. That's all been imported into our drawing. So that's how that works. In this lesson, we're going to be querying user-defined property information, which will create a point group. The list of points included in the group is determined by a query that contains user-defined properties. This exercise continues from importing points with user-defined properties. So let's go ahead and create a point query. Go ahead and open up your points-4e drawing, which is located in your tutorials folder. Next, go ahead and go into your tool space and then into your Prospector tab. And you'll notice that if we click on point groups and right click, we can go ahead and select new. We're going to create a brand new point group. We get our point group dialog box. We're going to rename this. We're going to call this Storm Manholes Invert In. On the Query Builder tab, we'll select that. We're going to check to modify our query. Then we're going to right click in this area right here within our table area, and we're going to insert a row. Now for the property, we're going to select a user defined property. Click the drop down and select manhole in invert. Okay, and then for the operator, we are going to go with less than. Then after that, the value, double click on the cell right here, we're going to type in 93, an invert of 93, then click apply. Whoa, what just happened? I've got all of these ground shots showing up within this point group. I must have done something wrong. Well, let's check it out. Let's see if we click on points and we open this up a little bit more. We've got our entire list of points here. We've got everything, okay? Including our ground shots. Now, if we scroll all the way over to our manhole in invert, should show up as a column. Here it is. See right here, manhole pipe in invert. It looks like the query did it right. Every single shot, it looks like we have a 0 elevation listed for every single one of these points. So our query is doing things properly. If we really wanted to get interesting, right click, select properties. Let's just say we don't want to include those ground shots. Let's go into our query builder, uncheck this modify query, go to include, and we're going to include raw descriptions matching, manhole. Actually, let me cancel out of this. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. If we go under storm manholes, right click, go under properties, go into include. I'm going to copy this description right here. Control C, cancel out of this, go back into our point group, click properties, make sure our modify query is turned off, go into include, click the checkbox with raw descriptions matching, click this area, then paste that information. Then go into the query builder and we're going to select this modify query checkbox again. But in this query, this is including now the raw description of our manhole. if we right-click, select Insert Row, we're going to select this property, select manhole pipe invert again, pipe in invert again, then select an operator of less than and a value of 93. And hit enter. Now this is very important. Be sure that you don't miss this step. Make sure that you set the operator with this drop down and select AND. Then click apply. This should get rid of all of our ground shots and only include our manholes. Click apply, then click OK. Then type REA to regen all. Voila. So it looks like after we applied that, if we go into our point group, select that, you can see how we now have only 4 different storm manholes that have a pipe in invert elevation of less than 93. So that's how you go about querying user-defined property information in Civil 3D. So in this lesson, we're going to be learning about creating a label style that displays a user-defined property. In the last exercise, we went over creating user-defined properties, but in this exercise, you'll create a label style that displays user-defined property information for a point. Okay, we're going to be creating a label style that displays, again, a user-defined property information, and it uses the drawing from points-4b, which is located in your tutorials folder for those that are subscribers. So when you open this up, we have all of these points. A lot of these points are for the pond, and we've got some storm manhole points here as well. But once we've opened up the points-4b drawing, you can go ahead and go into your tool space, which is right here, and then go into the settings tab. Okay, now what we're going to do is under point, we're going to expand that. Then we have label styles. Go ahead and expand that. Then we're going to click on standard, right click, and select copy. We get our label style composer dialog box, and you can see we've got standard listed right here, but we also have in these little brackets we've got a copy, since we're dealing with a copy. We're going to change the name to manhole UDP. Then after that, we're going to go into our layout tab. See, we've got a preview listed right here to show what we're going to be dealing with whenever we make our changes. Okay, and over here we want to make sure that we're on point label style and not on point style. So be sure you're on that. So now any edits that you make to the point label style will be displayed in the preview pane. What we're going to do now is we're going to click this button right here to create a text component. This is a text component for our label. And see, already we're getting something going on right here in our preview. Okay, in our component editor right here, for the name, we're going to call this invert in. For our anchor component, we're going to change this to point description. Then for anchor point, we're going to anchor this to the bottom left. And then for the text attachment, we're going to change this to top left. And you can see all of these changes being reflected in our preview pane. Now under text, for contents, we're going to change this. We're going to highlight this portion right here, which is our text. We've got our text component editor, our dialog box on the Properties tab. properties. We're going to go to manhole, which correlates or corresponds to our name, which is invert in. That's our pipe in invert. Then for precision, we're going to change this to 2 decimal places. Then we're going to, this is very important, again, make sure that once you've made all of these changes, click this arrow right here to activate that. Puts it into the preview pane. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click in front of this, click in front of our code, and we're going to type in invert in colon, then space. Then after that, click OK. And you can see how that changes. Actually, if I wanted to, I can click my middle wheel and I can zoom real time in and out, or if I hold down on the middle click wheel, I can pan. So you can see what's going on in this preview window. And that's how you go about creating a label style that displays a user-defined property. Click OK. That's it, folks.